Curious on the attendance thing. You said it wasn't as dire as it looked. As I recall, the numbers were like 70% for kids in under DCFS, right? Whereas 78% was the number for the general population. Is that correct, or are those modified?
Those are the correct numbers. I don't remember exactly, but I believe the first numbers were maybe in the 40s. And so when they got the corrected data, it was the children in foster care are still not doing as well as the general population, but still both populations, there's lots of room for improvement in absenteeism. But we were. It did feel a little bit better that it wasn't quite as low, but again, same efforts, same improvements, and we took the same action to try to improve that because 70% is still too low.
I was quite shocked that the number in the general population was 78%. That seems to me to be abysmal. Yes. And that concerned me just as much as the 70%. I would expect there would be a difference, right? But I was surprised how low the numbers were in general. So.
Okay, are you through, Senator? We have a question from Senator Escamilla.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Clearly with the general population and to the statement made by the Senator, it's a little bit different, but when it comes to foster care, are there any criteria related to expectations from those foster care parents that engage in, because there is that different level of connection? How does that work, and what are the expectations when that happens?
Yeah, but foster parents are absolutely expected to ensure that children are getting to school. If there are any challenges with that, that's when we would meet as a child and family team and bring in the resources from the school. They have Youth Connect. I may not be saying that exactly right, but they have designated employees at the school who work specifically with foster children. They're able to check in with them weekly and help support getting the absenteeism at a better rate. So the education is also reported every time that there's a court hearing, so a summary is provided to the judge, so that the judge, the GAL, and all of the parties are able to talk about what we can do to better support getting the children to school. But absolutely, foster parents are trained and are aware of the absolute priority that children attend school regularly and that they get their education.
Follow-up question, Madam Chair. So, but are there any specific, consequences? I mean, do you guys have a metric that is being measured beyond just is 78%? I mean, what happens when, let's say, all of my foster care children are not attending school and it's not their choice at that point? I mean, like, what happens? Do you guys take any action on this? I mean, this is their education.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's really good feedback. We can certainly take that back to the team and look at, do we need to embed some expectations on that? When we looked at the data to find out why the absenteeism was so high, it was less about if a child was in a foster home and getting to school, and unfortunately it was more about those transitions. If they were transitioning, if they had to move, sometimes children will have hospital stays, that was really contributing, it appeared, more to the absenteeism of the foster children than foster parents who weren't really actively engaged in getting them to school. But I'm happy to take that back. I think that's a great idea, is to really talk about that standard so that there's some type of a point where we're really aware of, okay, we've got to all work together to figure out how to get this child to school on time and regularly.
So, Director, then your answer, then what we're doing is we're collecting data in an odd way then. I mean, you should be, what you just said right now makes more sense. That there were some medical situations, or those should be also acknowledged and should be counted, because that makes sense. I mean, as kids are transitioning, I recognize they're gonna be miss school. Moving them shouldn't be a lot of days, but if they're in a medical situation, that should not be counted as, being absent. That's a medical situation. So as you're collecting data, it would be nice to see those, factors and markers, because that makes a big difference. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, and just one last thing on that. Just, I don't want to speak on behalf of USBE, But part of the difficulty is they track, if you're absent, it doesn't matter if you're excused or not, it's an absence is an absence, which is fine. It's just, it just adds to that layer of being able to really dig into the data. So we do see a need to do that more on the case level and the individual level, but really good feedback, thank you.
Oh, and it was about a week and a half ago, I was involved with a team meeting where they were moving some children from one county to another to be able to have foster parents. And I was very much in favor of this because of where they had been. But they were down there like on a Monday, Tuesday, and the new foster mother said, well, we're going to wait till Monday to start them in school. And so they were just, I don't know, getting acclimated or whatever. But I even thought then, boy, I would just kind of plop them into school and get them going. But I was not the foster parent in that case. So I just, maybe there's should be some encouragement to get kids back in school. You know, kids are pretty resilient. They can be moved, and let them, you know, get their room put together at night, get them to school and start making new friends and doing all that. Okay, I do not see any other questions. Thank you. Appreciate that. I hope you'll keep going on that. Thank you. Okay, we're going to have a, oh, go ahead. Did you have a comment? No, I think, not yet. We have a fatality review executive summary, and we have Director Tracy Gruber coming up to introduce this. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the panel. We really appreciate your time today and the critical role that you play. I'm Tracy Gruber, the Executive Director of the Utah Department of Health and Human Services. You're going to be hearing from some of our staff this morning, including Director Myrup, who you already heard from. And today provides a glimpse of the complex and stressful and often heartbreaking work that our staff at the Department of Health and Human Services play. And I want to start just by acknowledging the 6,200 staff in our department, whether it's in child welfare, the state hospital, the developmental center, juvenile justice. They do incredibly challenging work and are motivated by improving outcomes for the individuals in the state that we serve. I would say that child welfare and your role on this panel is an important partnership. It is among the most important and challenging functions we perform in the Department of Health and Human Services. We all are driven by the same outcome of keeping kids healthy and safe and free of harm. And when they aren't safe and they are harmed or even killed, we all grieve, including our staff. We are not able to prevent every harmful act or death, and this takes a toll on all of us and mostly our frontline workers who often feel like they've failed when these events occur, even for children who aren't in the care and custody of our department. I think we're all familiar with the allegory or even metaphor of the cliff and the ability at the top of the cliff to prevent somebody from falling. And rather than having an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, having a fence at the top of the cliff. And this metaphor is the metaphor for prevention, and one that we think about all the time. And when we imagine our role, unfortunately, in the child welfare system and often in our other deep end services at the department, we're the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. The beauty of the merger of the Department of Health and the Department of Human Services is that not only do we have a role to play in prevention to prevent that fall from occurring, so do all of us, so does our entire community. And we take that role very seriously because we know that by the time they've fallen off that cliff, something has already occurred in that family. And while most of the time we can provide that safety and that renewed hope for those children and sometimes their families, unfortunately, sometimes we can't avoid that. Our role in the department in child welfare is to do no harm. We can't play the total role of preventing harm from kids, but we want to make sure that our processes, our policies, our staff, any of the pieces of the system that we do control are not a contributing factor, and instead coming in and helping. We know the question on everyone's mind today, and with all the cases that are going to be discussed, is what could have been done to prevent this? That's the question for all of us, not just the department. It's the question for every piece of the system that works. It's the question for our communities, our schools, that works to keep kids safe from harm. And it's not just your role or our role, but one for all of us to handle. And while we have the tools of prevention, and we will utilize those to our fullest extent, we do look ahead and take very seriously our role in looking at these cases. Stories in the news and the topics that will be discussed today in both the open and closed sessions are rightfully generating questions to make sure that we're not contributing to the harm caused to Utah children. We are accountable to you and to our fellow Utahns through you. We appreciate the opportunity to answer any questions you have about the fatalities or near fatalities that occurred over the past year. Fatalities that our Division of Continuous Quality Improvement or near fatalities review each year includes deaths of those receiving services from DHHS, excuse me, not just DCFS, but JJYS, DSPD, the state hospital, aging and adult services, the full gamut of where individuals might be touching the system. We evaluate every death in services and among those who have exited services within the past 12 months. We do this not only because we're directed by law to do it, we do it because it is critical to achieving our vision that all Utahns are healthy and safe. Our principles and values in our department and our daily actions demonstrate a commitment to continuous improvement, ongoing learning, and improving the system through innovation in partnership with all of you. These fatality reviews are core to our work and core to system improvement. We welcome the transparency, accountability, and oversight this hearing and this panel provides to our department as a critical partner in achieving a vision for all Utahns to be healthy and safe. At this point, I'd like to turn over the time to Carrie Bamborough and Jennifer Mendenhall, who are going to provide the overview of the fatalities in the last year. They're from our Division of Continuous Quality and Improvement, and of course, I'm always happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, and thank you. It's an honor to be here today to talk to you about our fatality review process. My name is Carrie Bamborough. I'm the director of the Division of Continuous Quality and Improvement. This division holds the Office of Service Review, which performs both internal and external reviews of programs within the Department of Health and Human Services. This includes the Case Process Review, the Child and Family Service Plus reviews, and the DHHS Fatality Review Committee. The Fatality Review Committee conducts fatality reviews for the Department of Health and Human Services. Annually, DHHS provides an annual executive summary of fatalities and near fatalities of qualifying individuals. The recommendations in the annual report are made based on cumulative data and information from all fatality reviews for all divisions under DHHS. Recommendations are made based on trends found in individual reviews and information gathered from the case factor debriefings with the caseworkers. Recommendations may include information on areas of improvement from trending systemic concerns that are identified throughout the fatality review process. These recommendations may not necessarily have contributed directly to the fatality, but were systemic issues or areas that could improve case practice, caseworker experience, client experience, or remove barriers for workers. I will now turn the time over to Jennifer Mendelson, who's our Fatality Review Coordinator, who's going to go into some of the data from that annual review and specific to DCFS.
Is this one on?
Should be.
Okay.
Just
The green light's not on.
put it,
If you can hear me.
put it close to you. That, yeah, you can almost happen to eat it.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Mendelson, and I am with the Department of Health and Human Services, the Fatality Review Coordinator with the Division of Quality and Improvement. Thank you again for allowing me to be here with you. We value our time with this committee and appreciate the opportunity to present every year. The death of any child in our state is a tragedy, and our goal is to recognize the barriers surfacing within our system, understand how everyday work is being completed by frontline staff, what factors are influencing their decision-making. With this knowledge, we can make thoughtful recommendations for systemic improvement. While the Fatality Review Annual Report represents all reported and reviewed fatalities and near fatalities of individuals served by the department, the charts and graphs included in this presentation, are you guys seeing them?
Just 1 sec.
Okay.
Okay, you started.
Do you need me to present? Oh, now it's okay. It was sent in, so. So the charts and graphs included in this presentation specifically represent the results of meaningful reviews for children served by the Division of Child and Family Services, or DCFS. As a reminder, the information contained in the individual fatality reports are protected records. This information provided in the annual report and in the presentation includes data and information from the fatality reviews, but questions on individual fatality reports cannot be provided during the public portion of this meeting. So this second slide, who's driving? So, slide 2. As required by state law, the Department of Health and Human Services Fatality Review Committee reviews cases with individuals who themselves have had an open case with the DHHS division at the time of their death or up to 12 months preceding the death. Oftentimes, especially with DCFS cases, there may not be an open case at the time of the death, but the individual may be qualified due to having received services within 12 months prior. The Multidisciplinary Committee of Statutory Appointees reviews in-depth information from case logs, law enforcement reports, medical records, and the Office of Medical Examiner and Vital Statistics. In an effort to provide additional information to the committee, DHHS has implemented a case factor debriefing process. These debriefings are conducted with caseworkers to gain a better understanding into the events surrounding the case activities, the services, and the possible fatality, and possibly the fatality. This process helps identify any systemic barriers that caseworkers face in providing care or services to individuals. The case factors debriefing portion of the fatality review process is voluntary and an open discussion to talk about the case, discuss barriers caseworkers are facing, and identify system improvements. The results of these debriefings are shared with the Fatality Review Committee during the review. The committee reports findings to the DHHS Executive Director and shares recommendations with leaders of the DHHS divisions and institutions with case oversight. Slide 3. The Fatality Review Team and DHHS, including DCFS, partnered on multiple system improvements over the past fiscal year, including continued the case factors debriefing process for the Division of Child and Family Services and implemented the process with the Division of Services for People with Disabilities and Juvenile Justice Services. We implemented a continuous quality feedback loop with agency partners by incorporating a quarterly collaboration meeting to review recent fatalities, demographics, and recommendation implementation. We updated relevant code for fatality review. We worked with Representative Watkins to clean up the statute, remove unnecessary bureaucracy, and clarify what cases required formal fatality review. We implemented a single point reporting system for all DHHS-related deaths using the Red Caps system. This form is available on the Division of Continuous Quality and Improvement website. Utilizing the red cap system will also support better on-demand data reporting and the ability to better report fatality information and trends over time. DHHS created and implemented a high-level case staffing process that includes operational units from across the department to evaluate cases and ensure collaboration internally with resources and action. This team includes operational units throughout the department, including DCFS, the Office of Licensing, and the Office of Services Review members. In fiscal year 2020, slide 4, excuse me. In fiscal year 2024, ending June 30th of 2024, the Fatality Review team reviewed a total of 179 cases. There were 59 total DCFS cases, including 49 fatalities and 10 near fatalities. This is down 2 cases from fiscal year 2023, so holding steady. The 5-year average is approximately 50 cases per year, with a large dip in fiscal years 21 and 22, possibly due to the public health emergency. Slide 5. These are DCFS fatalities by manner of death. The decedent's manner of death is determined by the medical examiner. Pending means a determination of the manner of or cause of death has not yet been reported by the medical examiner. An undetermined manner of death can be given in such fatalities as sudden unexpected infant death. In a continuing effort to better understand possible contributing factors to these fatalities, we tracked fatalities whose manner of death was undetermined and also included elements of unsafe sleep. And there were 2 cases that fit that category. Of the 4 homicides listed, all DCFS cases were opened due to the incident that resulted in the death. Only 1 case had prior DCFS involvement in the state of Utah. Slide 6. This graph shows the 5-year trend of DCFS cases reviewed by manner of death. This shows that the natural deaths continue to be the highest number of fatalities reviewed by the committee. There was a slight decline in homicides from fiscal year 2023. However, accidental deaths have slowly increased over the last 5 years. Slide 7. This year, the Fatality Review Committee reviewed 49 fatalities and 10 near fatalities for DCFS. This graph shows the relative proportion of DCFS reviewed fatalities by age in relation to the most available data of child fatalities in the general state of Utah population. It also highlights the most vulnerable age group as children under the age of 1. Slide 8. This slide represents the percent comparison of fatalities of DCFS compared to the most available data of child fatalities in the state. The higher death rate of DCFS served children may be due to the fact that children receiving child welfare services often have more adverse childhood experiences, such as poverty, exposure to trauma, and chronic medical conditions. The division may also be alerted to the family due to the critical incident. Slide 9. This graph shows the services being provided by DCFS at the time of the fatality or near fatality. And again, some of the cases were open due to the incident that resulted in the fatality or near fatality. Next slide. This graph compares the suicide deaths of youth in the general state population with youth that had involvement with DCFS in the 12 months prior to their death. 3 reviews included children who died by suicide in fiscal year 2024, the same as in fiscal year 2023. Next slide. This reflects action taken by the Division of Licensing and Background Checks, or DLBC, in response to the near fatality or the death of a qualified individual in a licensed or certified placement on 4 cases reviewed by the Fatality Review Team. Out of the DCFS fatalities or near fatalities, only 2 were in licensed or certified homes and 1 had action taken. The actions include revocation of certification, a facility voluntarily closing, license suspended or closed, and a monetary fine. And next slide. Each year, the Fatality Review Committee makes recommendations from individual and system reviews across DHHS. These recommendations may not necessarily have contributed to a fatality, but were systemic issues or areas that could improve case practice, caseworker experience, client experience, or remove barriers to services. The DCFS recommendations were that DCFS should continue to support the voluntary case factors debriefing process. The case factors debriefing process is a way to help identify systemic barriers department employees are facing. Workers are able to answer questions about the case, the critical incident, and systemic barriers facing workers and service recipients. DCFS caseworkers are currently participating at a rate of 80%, and the Fatality Review Team would like to improve the participation to at least 85%. DCFS will also train workers on sentinel injuries. Sentinel injuries are visible, poorly explained injuries in young infants that raise concern for abuse. And then DHHS recommendations were that DHHS will continue to develop the provider system to be able to support individuals with behaviorally complex needs. This was an area identified in several case factor debriefing interviews where case managers reported difficulty in finding appropriate placements due to a lack of providers or a lack of experienced providers. We understand that this is a concern that extends beyond DHHS, as services, especially in more rural areas, are either unavailable, wait lists are extensive, or the services are available but not sufficient to meet the needs of the population, which is why this recommendation was made to DHHS as a whole service system. And then the last slide. Thank you again for your time and close attention to this very difficult and important information, and for your commitment to this process and advocacy for improving our system as a whole. We welcome your feedback and wholeheartedly appreciate any guidance and recommendation that the committee may have.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions maybe from Senator Johnson.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. So there's two sides of this death thing, right? Because, I mean, some of the ones that are in the press are kids that weren't removed from homes, right, with their natural parents, right? And the others have to do with people that are in custody, right, or in foster care. And there's got to be a different standard for that too. I just want clarification on that. So when you, it seems like there must be a higher standard for removing a kid from a parental home versus taking someone out of, maybe danger at a foster home, right? Are there different thresholds for that, or I just want to better understand?
Well, and I can let the division speak to that.
Okay.
But none of the homicides were involved with the division at the time of the death. So any of the deaths that were in or had DCFS services were either natural, accident, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't think I'm following that exactly. So you're saying that they weren't in foster care? They were with their natural parents?
The 4 homicides, correct.
Okay.
And so the case opened due to the critical incident. The child was seen in life by the division prior to the death. Therefore, that person is a qualified individual.
Okay.
So we do the review. Another thing would be if they had services within the year prior to the death. Then I compare that to when I get the list of the deaths, I compare that to the DCFS records, and I inform the division that they had a case on someone that passed and it will be a qualified individual.
Okay. Do you want to address the other part of that question as far as, I understand, there's got to be a higher standard for removing a child from their parents, right, versus taking them out of a foster home or something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're working with a parent, we have risk and safety assessment tools that we use to really help inform the decision on whether or not the child can remain safely in the home, or if we really need to remove the child to assure their safety. When we have children that are in our custody in a foster home, if there are concerns about the safety of the child in that home, we are considered the guardian of that child, and so we can make determinations on placement based on any of those concerns. So there is a process, and it depends on the level of risk to the child. So if a foster child's in a home and we've identified that they're unsafe, we can remove immediately, and there's no, there would not be a need for a shelter hearing, things like that, because we're considered the parent and making those decisions on placement. If it's just a foster home that we're feeling like is not really meeting the needs of the child, or there's a need for a different placement, but they're not unsafe, we would do a 10-day notice, which gives the foster family a chance to have due process in being able to explain why the child should remain in their home and being able to address the concerns we may have. But yes, to answer your question simply, anytime that a child's in a foster home and we feel like they're unsafe, we do have the ability to move them to a new placement.
Back to the data again. There were a couple of those charts that confused me a little bit because, when there's a higher incidence in the general population, right, you would expect that, right, because there's more children there. But some of those weren't corrected for kind of a per capita thing, right, based on how many kids there are, how many are in danger. So how do you adjust for that? Because a couple of the charts you did do that, but a couple of them you didn't.
When we tried to adjust for the rate per 10,000 or 100,000, our data is there's so few that it skewed the data. So when we adjusted it for 10,000, it looked like we had 848 homicides.
Right.
And it just doesn't, our data set is so small that adjusting it for that rate just didn't give you the information that you needed.
Okay. I figured that, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Acton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I wanted to say how valuable I think that the voluntary case factor debrief comments were as we read the report. And it makes sense because debriefing after an interaction, you'll have a better perspective and all the parties involved. Is that just from the caseworker debriefing, or are there others? Do they debrief with law enforcement or?
Generally, we have just started this process. We've been doing it with DCFS now for 2 fiscal years, and we've started it with 2 other agencies, DSPD and JJYS. We have kept it to the caseworkers or any other interested in parties with the division. So if there was a if the caseworker is gone and the supervisor was available and knew something about that case, then we would talk to them. We've had cases that have been duly served. They've had JJYS or probation and DCFS, or a DSPD DCFS case. We have attempted the case factors debriefing with both the SCE from DSPD and the case manager from DCFS, or the probation officer and the DSPD worker, that sort of thing.
Okay, I just think it's very valuable. But I do have a question about the report itself and why, I know there are probably good reasons why ages and genders are not
The ages
given.
is there, is it not? Did we-
No, they've blacked out like how many months old or how many years.
Oh, and that was due to data suppression issues.
Privacy concerns.
Yes, privacy concerns, yes.
Okay, I just wonder if knowing some of those things, like we know, for example, that children under age 1 are more vulnerable, being able to track trends and propose solutions, it might be helpful to know. I don't know, but
I believe slide
and
7 has the ages.
case 7?
Slide 7?
Oh yeah, you gave us the ages, but not in the report itself,
Correct,
in the redacted report. Yeah, I don't know,
Oh, you're talking about the individual reports.
yes.
Okay.
They don't give us the age or the gender of even any of the parents or siblings, and sometimes that would be, I think, helpful, but maybe.
I can
maybe
speak to the gender. The medical people that we have talked to have informed us and trained us that it can introduce bias to any recommendations by including the gender. We'd be happy to add we can't add the birth date, but we'd be happy to add the actual age to our report for you.
I think that would be good. I don't know, I think it's, because sometimes I'm like, how old was this? And then I figure out, oh, this was a teenager. And I was thinking it was, an elementary.
We'd be happy to add the age,
So
absolutely.
that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Escamilla. Let me get you, there you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes to the age, that's critical. I'm not sure why that was not provided. And there's no legislative restrictions there, because if we have to make those changes, it should be made.
Correct.
So I want to ask now more of a systemic question, because I'm reading on your recommendations, right? So there's a box that says the Fatality Review Committee did not have any recommendations.
You're talking
So-
about the individual reports?
Correct.
Okay.
So on those when they mean recommendations, is it based on what the current framework of the statute is, or is it recommendations on what we need to change? Because some of these cases are, I mean, scary. And if you're telling me that we are current, if everything is being followed by the rule of law, right, which is what I'm getting through the reports, then it means that we are missing something in terms of the law for not protecting children. So when I'm getting that the Fatality Review Committee says, oh, no recommendations here, does that mean their recommendation is based on what the current statute is and that the DCFS follow current statute? Because that still is not giving me recommendations based on being proactive if we need to change the law. So I need to understand, what does that mean exactly when they say that?
If I'm understanding correctly, the short answer is yes. We are answering that recommendations box on the statute questions that are listed above.
Okay.
So if DCFS followed all, or any agency that I review follows the law, rule, and procedure, then the answer is yes, there's no recommendations.
There's no okay, so,
I hope I'm not overstepping, but just to clarify, part of that review does include, is there, if I'm remembering correctly, if there's a recommendation for a policy, law, or practice to change? And so is that still part of the review? Yes. Okay.
where
So-
is that? I mean, I'm trying to see it because,
If you're looking at one of the individual
Yeah.
reports, it's in the box that's with those 4 questions. Well, last year, I think it was 6 questions.
okay. So, okay, I'm seeing it. So you have policy or procedure to change, is that the one? That will be the question. Did the review recommend that the law, rule, policy, or procedure be changed?
Correct.
Okay. And so, and that's an interesting piece, because I'm seeing that none of them have, that's shocking. I have to just admit that. So I want to, in terms of the process, because we can't discuss the specific cases here, I want to understand how, there are specific cases that I'm like, how did we miss this? And if it's because you're following the rule of law and you don't have any ability to move in there, I recognize that. And as a lawmaker, we need to make changes. So I mean, maybe going back to who this Fatality Review Committee is, if you can provide that, like who are the experts that are doing this? Because at least on one of these cases, I do have some serious concerns that there's no recommendation on policy, specifically when it happened within the review case. I mean, the case was in the hands of, like you said, so you explain the frameworks of timeline, right? So if someone comes in and within a year was part of an investigation, that if something is a fatality or a near fatality case, that will be counted in this group of cases, correct?
Correct.
But there are some cases where there was an open investigation happening and it happened while that was taking place.
Or the investigation opened because of the incident.
Correct, you're right. Yeah, which is true in some cases. So I have one where it's just alarming to me. So this helps, which recommendations, if they are any, as long as they're following the rule of law, it seems like no one was, that DCFS was following protocol and the rule of law. But I would like to have more conversations about how there's no recommendations of policy or procedures to be changed, because some of the stuff
And
is
Senator
alarming.
Escamilla, we are going
To
to
do that,
address
yeah.
that. Yes,
And
we
but I
are.
think to the public, they should know that will happen
Yeah,
in a
then,
closed
yes,
meeting on
thank
the
you.
specific cases, and who are these Fatality Review Committee specialists, just so people know, the experts that are behind making this information and review. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? I don't see any. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Let me turn your mic on. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
if you don't mind, the response on who are the members of the Fatality Review Committee, like their expertise, I think they were gonna respond to that.
Do you want me to share it?
Yeah, you can share who's on. While she's pulling that up, I do want to just say one comment that, and thank you for that feedback. We look forward to having that conversation later. Some of our annual recommendations that we make do kind of take some of those, okay, we're seeing these things in all of these cases, and we try to take that cumulative data to report those in our annual recommendations. We have had cases where we've made some recommendations for either more training, or that maybe a division needs to look at a particular policy or procedure. None of those this year happen to have been DCFS cases, but that has happened in some of our reviews that we've done.
Do you want their, excuse me, their roles or
Yeah,
their names?
just who, yeah, their backgrounds and expertise.
So we've got the 3 people from my team, for the DCFS, I'm speaking of
Correct,
DCFS only. The 3 people that are on my team, we have representation from DCFS's, all of DCFS's regions, another person from the CQI office, law enforcement,
CQI, can you?
I'm sorry, continuous quality and improvement.
Okay.
Law enforcement, mental health, the DCFS state administration, 3 people from there, another person from quality and improvement, Attorney General's office, the Ombudsman's office, the Guardian Ad Litem's office, Primary Children, Safe and Healthy Families, another person from CQI, representation from DCFS's intake, risk management, or Department of Health and Human Services risk management, another AG's office, and JJYS.
Thank you.
We also can add ad hoc members as needed.
Thank you.
Pretty big group, sounds like. Okay, did that answer your question, Senator?
Yes,
Okay,
Madam Chair, thanks.
thank you. Okay, thank you. And just to let the committee know, you have received reports from the Child Welfare Statutory Time Requirements Report, the Psychotropic Medication Oversight Program, and then, so you can just look back if you didn't notice it when you received that in your emails. So, are we ready? Okay, Senator. Oh, sorry.
I would move that we close the meeting to the public pursuant to Utah Code subsection 52-4-2052B for the purpose of reviewing child welfare-related fatality review committee reports and agency responses.
Okay, we've had a motion to close the meeting to the public pursuant to the Utah Code. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passed unanimously. We will go do that, and then we will be back.